All right, let me start this video with two disclaimers. One, if you're MAGA, you're going to want to go ahead and leave because there are going to be things in here which are going to be way, way beyond your understanding, your level of comprehension, okay? And if you are blue of any shade, all right, you need to pour yourself a coffee and come back, or whatever it is you drink, okay? Because if you don't understand these terms, which are being thrown around interchangeably, then it's easy for the people who in this regime are trying to institutionalize fear and control. It's going to be easier for them to get away with it, okay? So we're going to go through the progression, right? People say, oh, he's a fascist. Oh, he's a Nazi, blah, blah, blah. All right, okay. Let's talk about what those things are, where we are, and what is very likely going to happen here, okay? And yes, this is in response to, I did a video earlier about how I actually thought about the whole Jimmy Kimmel thing, but this is, what comes next action, all right? So democracy, that's where we were pre-Trump, okay? Where you have like two-party system, basically, fair elections, you have courts that are running, civil society, people have rights, all the things, okay? Right below, so it goes democracy, authoritarianism, dictatorship, and then fascism, and then Nazism, okay? So just to help you plot along, all right? So that's democracy. Authoritarianism is when you have an attempt for one group, right, to consolidate power, to kind of jerry the elections, things like that, okay? I mean, and guys, it's vastly more complicated, but I'm giving the highlight reel so as not to bore you to death, okay? It's somebody who intimidates the opposition and kind of maybe talks about political violence, or maybe it's there, but it's more the threat of it than the actual thing of it, okay? Now, a dictatorship or a dictator can exist in either authoritarianism or fascism, right? Fascism. That dictator is that it would be a single party, right? A single person. So think like North Korea, right? Dictatorship, okay? Whereas an authoritarian would be more a party controlling everything. Hopefully that makes sense. There's a lot of nuance. Again, I'm just sliding across the surface as to not make this so boring. Okay, so then you move into fascism, right? Which from authoritarianism, basically next step, fascism, okay? And that's where you have this sort of cult of personality, where there's this ideology, which is now it's not just about control, right? And a single party controlling thing. It's about this ideology, right? Which is being forced into every aspect, okay? And where there's this single party control dictating pretty much every single element of your life, whether that's school, love, your personal life, your work, what you can say, dissent is completely crushed, all of that, okay? That's where you're into fascism. Don't forget, I'm going to circle back to where we are and what comes next, so don't fall away yet, all right? From fascism, you go into Nazism. I have to say it so that the algorithm doesn't trip, okay? And there's only been one country who's ever gotten there. You guys all know that it's Germany, all right? So you can have fascism without Nazism, but you cannot have Nazism without fascism, all right? So Nazism is like a blend, a variety of fascism, okay, which requires basically racial purity and, for lack of a better way to say it, the genocide of somebody else, of another group, of a targeted group, okay? Now, obviously, in Germany, that was Jewish people, but it doesn't have to be Jewish people, okay? So, and I do want to take this point for any MAGA people that are still listening. First, you must be so confused. And secondarily, I just want to remind you guys that just like when we say we're talking about Germany in that area, we don't say Germany, we say Nazi Germany, that when people talk about this period in American history, they're going to say, well, MAGA America. Okay, so history is a long time to be an asshole, and that stink will be all over your family, all right? Anyway, moving on. So I want to talk about where we are, okay? Now, despite all of his chest pounding and all the things that are happening in this country, which feel very, very scary, okay? Trump is not a fascist. That's not true. Trump is totally a fascist, okay? But we are not in a fascist state just yet. Okay. And why do I say that? Because we do still technically have working elections, functioning elections, and we do still technically have a two-party system and an independent judiciary, right? So, and civil liberties are there, even though they are clearly being eroded and criminalized, but they are still there. So because those things have not been taken over yet, you can't say that we live in a fascist state. Is Trump a fascist? Hell yes. Okay. Now, in Nazi Germany, they went from a functioning democracy, okay, to full-on Nazism in like a decade, okay? So, but what I want to say is if you go all the way across history, whether that's Mussolini, Schmittler, or all of them, okay? The number one thing so basically you have to look at that as a scale, right? I'm just getting a check on the time. A scale, right? So again, let's go. It goes democracy, authoritarianism, dictator or dictatorship, but you can have a dictator in either authoritarianism or fascism. So democracy, authoritarianism, fascism, Nazism, okay? So we are definitely heavy into authoritarianism now, all right? And he certainly has fascistic tendencies. And for my measure, 1,000% unchecked, this MAGA movement moves towards Nazism. Because if they could racially purify this country by whatever means necessary, I could be wrong, but for my measure, what I see, how like cult sort of programming, I really feel like if these people had the chance to do it, they would do it. And that's not me just saying rhetoric. I really genuinely believe that if they could engage in eugenics, racial purification, where they could end up at the end of the day with, as they said, 100 million people in America, translation, 100 million white people in America, that they would do it. All right. So we are in authoritarianism. No question about that. We are moving towards fascism. All right. So this what happened with Jimmy Kimmel and 100 other things. Guys, you have to remember that all of these things, all right, they are predicated on fear. All right. So if you look at every single authoritarian or dictatorship or even, well, I was going to say Nazism, but of course that's because, we bombed them into the 23rd century. But my point is, it all requires fear. It requires silence. It requires compliance. All right. So this is not the time. So if you've been on this app, waxing poetic and running your pie hole about how, democracy this and democracy that, and now Jimmy Kimmel, so first Stephen Colbert and then Jimmy Kimmel gets gone, and you're like, all right, that's it. I'm taking my ball and I'm going home. That's the wrong thing to do, because all across history, what you can see is that fascism is accelerated by compliance. Okay. So here's the thing. Will they eventually come for certain people, even people like myself? Probably. But that's the risk you take, okay, to defend and buy democracy. It's not words. It's words now. But what it will mean before it means physical action, like defense, is it will mean standing your fucking ground. All right. So please don't take your ball and go home right now, because this is not the time for that. They are counting on it. All right. They call us snowflakes and this, that. This is not the time to be a snowflake. This is the time to go, okay, bet, I heard you. I know you have all these, fascistic tendencies and you want to do this, that, and the other, but I want to do a lot of things too. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. Okay. Let me remind y'all that there are more people against this movement in this country and around the world than there are for it. By a huge margin. Okay. This is a cult of personality, which has taken root in this country, which it is going to take a long time to recover from. But what our history books say about what we did as Americans in this moment will depend only on, guys, there is no America coming to save us. Okay. We are the United States. What the history books will say is Americans did X, Y, and Z in this moment. So I will leave that to you. But for me and mine, I will keep talking, keep speaking out, keep protesting, keep posting until they literally physically take my ability to do that away from me. And I hope that you will join me in that cause, because this is your country. And this is the moment where you stand up and say, no, you do not get to scare me into silence.